first. From Ross Dellinger, Greg Byrne, his opening address said, if it weren't for football, we would not have 21 sports at the University of Alabama. We do not want to see college sports lose women's sports and also Olympic sports. There's one. And then also from the roundtable on Capitol Hill, Nick Saban to senators, collectives, believes that revenue sharing is a necessary in college athletics, but not employment. While the roundtable was described as NIL, it was more about employment and also revenue sharing. One more note, and I hope this is the right one with Saban. This is from Jerry Moran. They said they're very close, very, very, very close to a bill, although that's not what I heard from everybody, that there was like a 50-50 chance, and they're running out of time because there's also election coming up at the end of the year. And then there's this one comment from Saban that he made early on about how college football, the way he was brought up and what he saw when he got into it 50 years ago, it's just not the same. It is just not the same. And he was also talking about how states have different laws like it's supposed to be. So, Paul, what today was accomplished other than nothing?
I think it was smart to have Nick Saban up there. I think that was really a smart thing. There was a lot of posturing. Joe Manchin kind of sounded the alarm on, this is, NIL is killing college athletics. NIL is not killing college athletics. College athletics is killing college athletics. I mean, let's make that perfectly clear. And look, he played football like back in the 70s at West Virginia, or in college in West Virginia, and so he has the kind of the old school view of it. And if this means that they're going to pass a bill, and the only thing that Congress really needs to do to make it fair and equitable is to, like they would do with gambling, like if gambling became legal in all 50 states, and as of today, college athletics is still legal in all 50 states, correct? And the territories, all of that, it's all legal. So because it's legal in all 50 states, but everybody has different laws on the legality of different levels of NIL. So what their job should be is to make a national standard for rules that every state must follow. Like, you can't do this, you can't do that. Here's the national standard for rules. And set up what is the national, like whatever the national standard for revenue sharing is, and what particularly that the NCAA and the schools cannot do to screw athletes out of money that they would have rightfully earned. That's what they need to put up there and allow a track for revenue sharing. I don't believe that is what they have ready to go. I think that's probably something else that's not that. And I also don't believe that they're this close to a bill. I really don't believe that. And I don't think there's any motivation to get that done anytime before the election.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to sort through. There's some interesting quotes in there. I think Saban said at one point that his wife, Terry, asked him, like, why are we still doing this? Why are we still doing what? Like, well, all they care about is getting paid, talking about the players. And I know that will lead to some NIL consultant who, uses that as, well, the coaches have always gotten paid. And I'm sure that's been some of the discourse is that argument, that age-old argument of, well, the coaches get paid all this money. They've got freedom of movement. Why don't others? And it's not exactly that black and white, but, that is an argument that they've had trouble kind of talking their way around because it is valid, even if it's not exactly that. It is, an argument that's used for the players when you've, for so long and so many decades, not given them their fair share, so to speak, and you've seen these contracts balloon and you see coaches moving around and these huge buyouts and all these different things. I think we've come a pretty good way in the last few years in terms of NIL and transfer portal and all those things. But, yeah, what it's basically turned it into is the thing they said wasn't the point to begin with, is pay for play. It's absolutely turned into pay for play, like everybody knew it was going to turn into. So that's what he's talking about, and that is true, and that is absolutely going on. I don't know how that gets resolved ultimately. I'm with Paul. I don't necessarily feel like, and I'm not predicting anything here, but I don't necessarily feel like there is a life raft being thrown anytime soon because our government is awfully busy at the moment and will be even busier in the coming months. But I will say that this is brighter news than they've had in probably forever. I mean, even the fact that there's even a thought that they could have something come down the pipeline in the next, foreseeable future, next few months, few weeks, whatever it might be, is something to latch onto that I don't think was ever really there to begin with realistically. So that made my eyebrows raise a little bit. I don't know about you guys, but I mean, the fact that they could be onto something would be absolutely massive. Now, as for all the rest of it, about the revenue sharing and Title IX, and I mean, there's just a lot to unpack there. Title IX, that's going to have to be a part of the conversation, especially when you talk about the revenue sharing piece. Okay, so are softball players making what? Based on the fact, or swimming or track and field or whatever sport you want to throw out there in comparison to men's basketball, football, the real revenue drivers. I mean, those will all be unpacked, I guess, in the conversations that follow. But I think everybody believes revenue sharing is inevitable. I think everybody believes if there's not a certain way this is done, then sports getting cut is probably inevitable for some. And, let's see if the government's actually going to help out here. I never thought I'd see the day, but today was slightly encouraging as opposed to believing there was no chance in hell.
All right. Do you have the Jim Phillips quote?
Yes, 1 second.
Jim Phillips, the commissioner of the Atlantic Coast Conference. By the way, the Big 12 tournament, the first-round games, UCF earlier today beat Oklahoma State badly, and then also right now West Virginia in a back-and-forth. That game's at halftime. We'll get to that score and also the play-in. So, I guess, first-round games up in Kansas City. The women had the championship game tonight. If athletes are deemed employees, Jim Phillips believes universities can pay athletes in sports that make revenue, football, basketball, men's basketball. And then to satisfy Title IX would pay an equivalent number of female athletes. The rest could be cut. You can go from 28 to 6 sports in one fiscal year.
Yeah, no, I
said from the beginning, even though I don't know enough the legal parts of this, that what would probably create, oh, wait a minute, we've got to fix this if it messed with Title IX.
Yeah, and so it's technically not messing with Title IX because all you have to do is create equal opportunities at each institution. You don't have to have softball and baseball. You don't have to have either of them. Like you could go to 6, like you said, you could go to 6 sports. Football, men's and women's basketball, pick your other 3 to even it out that would make you the most money, and the rest are all gone because and I'll tell you, we saw this with Title IX. So when Title IX expanded to include sexual assaults on campus, the politicians stood out in front of a Bank of American flags and clapped and had survivors up there and said, "We've done it. We've solved the problem." But all they did was they said, your university is in charge of complying with these standards, and you guys get to set how you do that. So basically what bureaucracies do, which most universities are very bureaucratic, even the best ones are still a little bit bureaucratic, they just set up a way to feed through and check the boxes. But then when it came up time for review, you can ask Liberty about this because it just happened to them last week. You're like, well, you really didn't do anything. You just told us you were. And because if it comes into checking boxes and bottom lines, what they'll do is check boxes, save the bottom line, and then swimming and diving is gone, and tennis is gone, and all those other things are gone unless a school decides to fund them on its own. But that's gone for most schools. So yes, if you make them employees, that makes their payroll go up, insurance and all that. So revenue sharing is the better model for them. They just need to get their heads around what that means.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of mixed responses to just the whole showing. I mean, like I said a few minutes ago, I'm more encouraged by the fact that there's at least some idea that they could possibly reach a resolution. But then there's a lot of blowback of like, well, it's not going to happen with this Congress, or it's not going to happen in this time frame. So I don't know. I feel like this is about NIL, but it's not really about NIL. Mm-hmm. Like it's about the bigger picture, and it's about more things like revenue sharing. I know that NIL is like under that umbrella, but I think when you hear they're talking NIL on Congress, they're talking about like specific, like, I don't know, the specifics of NIL as opposed to the greater big picture, which I think is what Jim Phillips is talking about, and which I think the others are talking about as well. When they talk about the elimination of sports, that's not NIL related. That's the bigger picture. So yeah, this had the NIL title, but I mean, there's just a lot of questions. I mean, it's impossible to really know right now what the after effects would be. Like, how does Title IX even apply? Like, I mean, how does it, like, if they become employees, which we don't know if that's the case or not yet, then how would Title IX even apply?
Yeah, and Paul, you said it
So,
probably would.
so like, that part of it, we can get hung up on that, but we don't even know, like, if that's even a thing to worry about for Ohio State if they were to go to an employee model. Would it still be a concern for, Western Kentucky because they're still under more of a collegiate designed umbrella where you're paying players or maybe there's revenue sharing, but it's still more folded into the school? Like, those are the details that we have no way of knowing right now that will lead to whatever ends up happening with various other, like maybe they become club sports. Like I've seen as a simple solution that volleyball, or maybe not volleyball, but whatever sport becomes more of a club sport.
Lacrosse.
Like lacrosse. And maybe that's the solution to it. But yeah, I mean, if you're doing the whole, we're going to be the NFL minor league thing with two conferences, the Big Ten conference and the SEC conference or whatever, and they're playing by a set of rules where everybody's deemed employees or they have a collective bargaining or whatever the case may be. Well, maybe they don't have to worry about it, but other schools that do it a different way, they don't have the money to just pay everything and never worry about it. They have to do it a different way. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack, but just interesting to kind of see all, I guess a guy like Saban being involved. I think that's a positive. I think that definitely brought more attention to it. And I think having a voice like his in the room is something that could be very constructive for college leaders trying to figure this mess out.
All right, Xavier Wolf in the chat room. This is America. Getting paid for your skills and talent is a cornerstone of what motivates us to be the best in the world. Pay the players. That's from the chat room.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. The players are getting paid now. The question is, how are you going to pay them moving forward? The question isn't whether you're paying players or not. They're getting paid through NIL, but now they're trying to wrangle it and make sure that everybody's on an even playing field, like having the same state laws. And so, yeah, that's a given. They're getting paid. It's just a matter of, are you going to pay them like full-time employees? And to your point, maybe you believe so, and certainly a lot of people do. And that's the argument that they're having right now is should it be more of you're an employee and you're getting paid like an employee as opposed to you're getting paid through the local Chevy dealer because of your name, image, and likeness. This would make it more professional in that sense.
All right, Smokey Bear, if unionized, can teams then go on strike?
Yeah. It's the fun part about being in a union, Smokey Bear. What are you talking about? You could go on strike.
I think that's his chat name. He was referring to me, although I've always liked that name.
Yeah, look. All right. So Craig, Garrett, and I have decided to unionize. We strike today. We've been approved by the National Labor Relations Board, and we strike. Yeah, we can do that. I do think that there's sometimes, like, most unions don't want to go on strike. I think that's what people think when you think of unions. Like, they're just made so that people can go on strike and not get fired. Well, that's actually a good thing, that you can have a way to fight for better and more fair working conditions and wages and go on strike. And you look at the Major League Baseball Players Union and the strikes and things that they've had. Yes, like, it can get annoying, and it can be really annoying when you're watching billionaires and millionaires fight. But yes, they could strike, but unions are set up so that those things are ideally not supposed to happen. Now, there's good unions and bad unions, and just like there's good companies and bad companies and all that. But yes, they could go on strike.
From Stan, if I was an athletic director and a college athlete or a team union formed, I would drop that sport or play scab replacement players.
Yeah, I don't know the legal ins and outs of how all that would work. That's above my pay grade. But yeah, there's a lot of things to sort through when it comes to the conversations being had right now. And so yeah, that would imagine that would be part of it. I mean, we were just talking about the possibility. And granted, like, I do feel like Nick Saban has a voice that needs to be heard and is useful. At the same time, I know that he has an agenda in some ways, and you can't you can't overlook that. And so I feel like you've got to look at it from all sides, and there's a lot of compelling arguments, but most of them reside on the side of the players. And it's just a matter of what kind of middle ground or what kind of help can you get. And I'm surprised we're even here and they're still. I mean, I guess I'm not surprised they're still trying to get that life raft because really it's their only option outside of just capitulating entirely and just giving up and saying, "All right, unions and contracts and full-time employment," and that's what they don't want to do. So. We'll see if somehow Saban and the rest of the gang can convince enough politicians that there's a middle ground to be met. But I'm not holding my breath.
UW fan Jim, you can only strike when contract negotiations go bad.
Yeah, that's it. Like you can't just decide we're in a strike. I mean, that's just not.
It's the middle of October. We want those orange Nikes. You're not giving it to us. We strike. Like
no,
you can't.
That's not how it works. No, and so you can do that. Also, let me tell you about scab players. Smokey, I'm old enough to have been alive when it happened, but I don't remember the NFL. Like it's not in my brain. You remember it. I do remember very well the spring training of 1995. On the heels of the 1994 baseball strike that was still going on, where they had replacement players. And let me just tell you, watching a guy who was, pitching 3 innings and going, Jesus, I'm tired, was not what you want to see. So hiring scab players means you're going to hire people who are not as good as the ones that you have. So a terrible option. And
87 NFL season, I believe it was, when they had the scab replacement players. Washington went out and found a bunch of pretty talented players. Some guys crossed the line for other franchises, and teams. It's been part of sports. I think what we have here, at least they had this discussion. I hope it wasn't a political stunt. It was, in some cases probably was, but they're also... with Nick Saban involved, I know there's some people, now Nick Saban. I think he truly does care. I think he really likes to see if he could somehow help in any way. He said that when he retired the night he did the interview with Reese Davis about college football and its future.
Yeah, and I think the one comment, it does ring hollow for some people, and rightfully so. The part about, well, why is he not in it anymore? And, my wife asked me or said to me, why do this anymore? And it's all they worry about is money. And, that does, and I know that's just kind of plucked out of the entire conversation, so I'm not trying to make a headline out of it by any means, nor is it the headline from today, but that still does ring a little hollow when you made as much money as Nick Saban made compared to what his players made during their time at Alabama. Now, that's slowly changing, but... he's a voice that I think needs to be heard, and I think there's others as well that could have valuable insight and help be productive in trying to get this thing corralled to where everybody's at least on the same page, to where we can hopefully at some point have the issue of having to come up with content to fill all of the legal space that's been filled these last couple of years with realignment or NIL bills or all of these other issues that have cropped up specifically surrounding player payment and unions and those types of things. It is the big kind of divide in the whole big picture right now. And so, better now than never. And hopefully this leads them down a path to where there can be some things that get resolved.
From S. Michael DeHart.